And so as we look at the text today, we see Jesus talking to those who would journey with him, who would follow him. And in my years of being a Christian, which is almost 40 years now, I've seen a shift. You know, I remember red telephone boxes, and then they had the silver ones when BT came in. And the older heads are looking at me like, yeah. I'm giving my age away. This grey is here for a reason. I earned this. In life you see change, right? And in the church you see change as well in terms of people's attitudes and so on. And I feel there's something very helpful to us. Well, there's always going to be something helpful to us from God's word. But in our life and times, I think there's something that we really need to take away from this. Because it seems that in this day and age, Christians quite often don't really understand the cost of the call. See, I talk about red telephone boxes because in those days, the cost of the call was a bag of change. Ka-ching, ka-ching, you're putting your change in the phone meter to try and keep it going. Keep the call going. And when you ran out of change, that's it. And that's if there wasn't a queue of people banging on the phone box. I remember once I was interested in this young lady, and we're just kind of beginning to explore a relationship. And I got on a phone call with her, maybe about 9:30 in the evening. And this was on a landline, by the way, just for context. You're thinking on a mobile, right? Yeah, WhatsApp call is free. No. This was on a landline. I watched the sunrise whilst I was still on that call. You can bet that my grandmother, who was brought up by, had words to say to me when that bill came. I knew that was going to be a costly call. £140. Now, we're going back to the late 80s, right? You could get a flight to New York for £200. So it was a costly call. Thankfully, I was doing pizza delivery. And so I had a little bit of money. I kind of, weighed it up in my mind. I thought, is she worth it? And this is the thing. So often today, people don't really understand the cost of the call. Jesus has, we've just read in Matthew, you've been reading how Jesus gave the Sermon on the Mount, and he's laid out his mandate of the kingdom. The king has come and he's revealing the kingdom. And people have heard this, and it's been radical. And we see here in verse 18 that there was a crowd. It's interesting. This section of text, it starts like a bad joke. You have a crowd, a scribe, and a disciple. And they all walk up to Jesus. But this isn't a joke, although, unfortunately, for them, it might have been a bit much more than that. But we see a crowd. The people are interested in Jesus. Sometimes we feel like if we could just get people interested in Jesus, that would be the win. And sometimes you see others that are just doing all sorts of, chicanery and trickery and all kinds of things to try and get people interested in Jesus, as if that's the goal. Not considering the cost of the call. There was a crowd. There was people interested in Jesus. Now, we want people to be interested in Jesus. As you're a church in this community, in this housing estate and beyond, obviously you want people to be interested in Jesus. That's the first step, that people begin to take notice. And yet, Jesus clearly isn't looking for modern day followers. I say modern day followers. You watch a YouTube video, like, subscribe, follow me. And following these days on social platforms is very easy. There's no cost associated with it. There's no commitment expressed in it. I mean, you can follow someone and not have to pay attention to them at all. But they're on your followers list. There is a cost to the call. And as much as we want to see people interested in Jesus, yes, we want people to follow Jesus, and yet we want them to follow him. Not just what he can do for them. So the crowd's there in verse 18, and Jesus is like, look, let's get a bit of space. And so he goes over to the other side, and a scribe comes up to him. A scribe is one who is a teacher of the law. They're scribes because they would have been ones who would scribe the law and help people to understand it. They have a history that goes right back into Judaism throughout the Old Testament. And so he was a man of standing. He was a man of status. And it would seem like quite an endorsement for this scribe to come to Jesus and call him teacher and say, I will follow you wherever you go. But clearly there was something that Jesus wanted him to understand, because he didn't fully understand the cost of the call. Wherever you will go. You see, in those days, and we hear the disciples mention this in Acts chapter 1, there was an expectation that when the Messiah came, he was going to establish the authority of Israel. He was going to get rid of all of their oppressors, all of those who were ruling over them, and that they would be free and he would usher in the heavenly kingdom. And so they were thinking that the kingdom's come now. And so he's thinking that Jesus is going to the palace. He's going to the throne, to the place of prominence. And yet Jesus says to him, foxes have holes. I don't know about around here. We have just so many foxes. I was looking out my window the other day. More foxes in my garden. They were in my neighbour's garden. I felt quite happy when they were over there. But my neighbour got his garden done. He got it all cleared, and now they've all come into my garden. And you hear them screaming at night. Foxes. They find holes for themselves. They find places to live and to lodge. And birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Where are you going to follow me to, Mr. Scribe? Jesus is saying. Where do you think I'm going? I don't have a 5-bedroom double garage residence. I don't have a palace or a throne that's visible to you just yet. So what are your expectations? Are they expectations of comfort, of greatness, of increased status? You see, these are all things that can cause people to come to Jesus in this day and age. Jesus is a bolt-on just to make their lives better. What do people want to be in life? They want to be happy. And you know what? Maybe if I try Jesus, he can make me happy. There's a cost to the call. Foxes have holes, and birds have nests. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Now, this doesn't mean that he was literally homeless, although he didn't possess his own property. He would have always been received and had places to stay. And yet, as an itinerant minister going around that means and sharing the good news of the kingdom, he wasn't established. Some of you may have grown up hearing, you know what? When you get older, you're going to get a job, and you're going to buy a house, and you're going to have a family, and you're going to be established. And this notion of buying a house in our country is almost somewhat of a status symbol. And not necessarily, you don't have to have a big glamorous house, just the fact that you're a homeowner. And you see it on some of those applications when you're having to do something for the local authority or the government. Are you a homeowner? Or your insurance, are you a homeowner? Or and it seems to mean something. Well, it also meant something then. And yet Jesus said, I'm not a homeowner. So where are you going to follow me to? You see, the reality is that when people come to Jesus for comfort, often their interest is short-lived. And when we try and gain people's interest and, with just promises of a better life, actually, that interest can be short-lived. Now, we understand that the gospel does offer us hope and healing and even joy. So let's not suggest that that isn't the Lord's intention. But our motivation in coming to Jesus must first be for Jesus and not for what he can do. He is the source. We come to the giver not just for the gifts that he gives, but for who he is. And as we do so, Jesus is making it clear that actually, to follow me, to be with me, will cost you something. It's going to be uncomfortable, is basically what he's saying to the scribe here. A disciple comes up to him and says, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. Jesus said to him, follow me and leave the dead to bury their own dead. Sounds like a hard saying. Sounds like Jesus is encouraging this disciple to maybe even disrespect his family. Bury your father. Leave the dead to bury their dead. Don't worry about your dad. Whew. Now, you have to understand that, in any culture, that's going to be quite a difficult saying to hear. But especially in that culture, where there was great esteem for elders, where they recognized that they were brought up in a tradition that believed in the commandments. Honor your mother and your father, that your days may be long. So what's this disciple to do with this? Jesus is highlighting the cost of the call. Some have said that it's unlikely that this disciple's dad was actually dead yet. And so what he was saying was, look, maybe it's not going to be long, or however long it's going to be, let me make that a priority first. And in brackets, because I will have security at that point. What happens when a parent dies, generally speaking, or at least in this culture? Inheritance. And so some have said this is a way in which this disciple is saying, look, let me just make myself secure first, and then I'll follow you. Let me take care of my financial standing and everything, and then when my circumstances are better, I'll follow you. To that end, when Jesus says, let the dead bury their dead, on a natural level, there's a sense in which he's saying, let those who are as dead as your dad take care of your dad. As in, he's not dead yet. That's not a priority. Let other people take care of him. You follow me. But on a spiritual level, and we know so often as we encounter scripture, it speaks on different levels all at the same time. I heard somebody once say that the Bible is deep enough to drown an elephant and shallow enough for a baby to swim in, all at the same time. And so whilst there's a practical sense we also recognize that there's a spiritual truth that Jesus is declaring here. Because as Paul expresses in Ephesians 2, all who are apart from Christ are dead in trespasses and sins. Spiritually dead. And so there's almost a sense in which Jesus is saying, let the spiritually dead bury the dead. You come, become alive, and give life. Because that is the call to follow Jesus. That we would be life bringers, that we would come and bring the gospel in such ways that people would know life and know hope beyond death. And so which would be the greater priority if we have a message that is greater than death itself? If we serve a king who has conquered the grave? And yet this would have challenged this disciples' desire for comfort, for security, even for respect, maybe. And so for many Christians today, I feel there's a sense in which we can struggle. People can struggle coming to Christ because when they begin to get a sense of what the call really costs, it's going to mean me laying down my desires, laying down what I want, laying down my needs, and putting Jesus first. Jesus isn't just a means to meet my needs and make me feel better about myself, but actually, I am coming to submit myself to Jesus and to follow him wherever he will go and to put him before all others. People can struggle with that. And rightly so. Jesus didn't make any apologies. I appreciated what you said. What was your name again, my brother? Andy. What you said today when you was making the announcements, bro. And you said, you know, it's not something we should be apologizing for. Jesus didn't make any apologies. Sorry, not sorry. No, this is what it's going to cost you. And there's something in us that actually that resonates with. Because we all desire to live for more than just the day-to-day routine. We desire to live for more than just the chasing of comfort and money and wealth. And Ecclesiastes chapter 3 says that eternity has been sown in our hearts. C.S. Lewis said that we are made for more than this. A famous quote. If I find in myself desires that nothing else can satisfy, I can only conclude I was made for more than this. We were made for relationship with God. We were made in his image, built for relationship with him in a way that only he can satisfy and fulfill. And despite the cost of the call, there is something in us that resonates with deep down in our hearts if we allow it. If we just tune out the voice of society and all that's being presented to us as the purpose for living and how we ought to live, and we really search ourselves, we realize that we're made for more than all of that. And there is a cost. And yet when we get a revelation of who Jesus is, we're willing to pay that cost. You can bet by the time 1 a.m. came on that phone call, and I'd been on the call for 4 hours already, I was weighing up, shall I continue with this call? Because it's costing a lot of money. But the conversation was going so well, I thought I couldn't afford not to. And at 3 a.m., just before the sun was getting ready to peek out, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I should end it here. But the call was going too well. Because I was getting to know this person. And in getting to know this person, I wanted to know them more. Now, That call was pretty much the long and the short of it, because that person didn't actually become my wife. But you was all waiting for the Hollywood rom-com. Yeah. No. I met Judith at a prayer meeting. Even better. Praise God. But when we get a revelation of Jesus, we're willing to pay that cost. And that cost isn't something that is a sort of an entry fee when you first become a Christian, and then you don't have to think about it again through the gate. We're constantly presented with turnstiles in our Christian life where the Lord is saying, will you follow me where I will go, where I will lead you? And you get those points in your life when you realize that to follow Jesus, this next step is going to require something more of you. And yet, you weigh it up and you pray and you recognize that ultimately, what can I say? Jesus is worth it. And that is the mark of a heart surrendered to the Lord. That is the mark of one who has given themselves to the Lord. Listen to John Stott. He said these words, which give us real insight when it comes to the cost of discipleship. Jesus never concealed the fact that his religion included a demand as well as an offer. Indeed, the demand was as total as the offer was free. I'm going to say that again because that was a lyric, that was a bar. Indeed, the demand was as total as the offer was free. Salvation is free, but it's not cheap. If he offered men his salvation, he also demanded their submission. Continuing the quote. He gave no encouragement whatever to thoughtless applicants for discipleship. There must be a sense in which people are genuinely seeking Jesus, seeking to encounter him, seeking to follow him, and in seeking to do so, recognize the cost of the call. And that readiness and that willingness to pay that cost, to lay down oneself, is a healthy indicator that someone is truly seeking to follow Jesus. And you might look at yourself right now and think to yourself, have I been that person who has struggled to continue to follow the Lord? Am I that person who has been in this relationship with the Lord but had wrong expectations of him? Am I that person who actually is more interested in my self-fulfillment, my self-gratification, than in the Lord's fulfillment of his purposes and his gratification? Because it can cause a real conflict in the life of people who are following Christ. At this point, we see that Jesus is, quote unquote, sifting. There's a crowd of people, but he's laying out the marks of those things which would characterize those who are true followers. And what a joy and a wonder it is that we're able to have that opportunity to follow. That we have that invitation to follow. You know, I've often said the amount of money people would pay to sit down with Jeff Bezos, the head of Amazon, and get business advice from him. Just to spend a week with him and to be able to see how he runs his business and how he organizes his staff and how he organizes himself, and Imagine you could follow Jeff Bezos for a year as his apprentice. Forget Alan Sugar. And you could just learn the value of that. But then, how many of us would really ever have that opportunity? And yet the King of Kings calls us to follow him. The creator of the universe. Like, we think that Jeff Bezos has got insights and understanding to give us. I want to read for you some verses from 1 Kings. Because in this little few verses that we're looking at today, there are a couple of what they might call Easter eggs. I learned that phrase. You know when you watch a music video or you watch a film or whatever, and there's little references in there that speak to something else. If you're into Marvel Universe, you might always be looking for them. Or I don't know, apparently Taylor Swift is very well known for putting Easter eggs in her music videos. Girls, am I right? Yeah? Thank you. There's some Easter eggs in this text. So, the first one I'm going to highlight links back to 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 19 to 22. So you can turn there in your Bible if you have that. Just a few verses. And this is where the prophet Elijah is calling Elisha, his successor, the one he's going to pass the baton to. So, it reads from verse 19. He departed from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who was ploughing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him. And he was with the 12. Elijah passed by him and cast his cloak upon him. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah and said, "Let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you." Oh, sound familiar? And he said to him, Elijah said to Elisha, "Go back again, for what have I done to you?" And he returned from following him and took the yoke of oxen and sacrificed them and boiled their flesh with the yokes of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him. So let me explain briefly. Elijah's the prophet. He's been used mightily by God. Elisha is to be his successor. Elijah has gone to Elisha and has thrown his mantle. You know, people say pass the mantle. It's like passing the baton. He's putting on him his authority, his prophetic authority. And Elisha's first response is, let me go and take care of the folks first. And so when we look at verse 20, and Elijah says, "Go back again, for what have I done to you?" Basically he's saying, no, you're not ready. So go and do what you're doing, innit? You're not ready. Obviously I've not identified the right person. Let me just, furthermore, give me my mantle back, because it's okay. This is obviously not for you. And so Elisha has confronted with that challenge. He's like, wow, no, this is it. And so what he does is, remember, he was there in verse 19. He was ploughing. So he was working. He was in his business with his animals, working the farm. And that was the family business. 12 yoke of oxen. That's 12 pairs of oxen. That's like, they're doing well. That's lucrative. What does he do? He kills them all. It's not even that he just leaves them. He demonstrates his sacrifice, his commitment to follow Elijah by killing his very source of potential income. And they all eat. It's like, no, I'm done with this. I'm going to go and follow the call that I've received. And so, as Jesus is sharing this, those of his community who would have been hearing the scriptures every day from their childhood would have understood the reference, just in the same way when you hear Elisha say, "Let me go unto my mother and father," and Jesus' disciples said, "Let me go and bury my dad." They would have heard those words and it would have resonated in their minds, and they would have thought about this situation and understood the type of commitment that we're called to in following Jesus. Because Jesus is at least a prophet. And yet, Jesus is much more than a prophet. Jesus is the King. Because we see another Easter egg here earlier on. And Jesus uses the term Son of Man of himself in verse 20 of Matthew 8. Birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man. And this is the first use of the phrase in Matthew, but it is a phrase that is used repeatedly by Jesus of himself and occasionally by others of Jesus. And there's a way in which it has a double meaning. In Ezekiel, the Son of Man phrase is used repeatedly to speak of the humanity of the subject of that term, the person being spoken about, Son of Man, go, speak to the people, etc. But also it has a divine and messianic connotation. If you look with me at Daniel chapter 7. I'm going to read from verse 9. Now here we see Daniel describing the vision that he had. As I looked, thrones were placed, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. A stream of fire issued and came out from before him. 1,000,000 served him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court sat in judgment, and the books were open. I looked then, because of the sound of the great words that the horn was speaking, and as I looked, the beast was killed and its body destroyed, and given over to be burned with fire. As for the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season of time. We'll get into the punchline in just a moment. What I want us to understand, first of all, is when it speaks of the Ancient of Days here, who is it clearly speaking about? God. Absolutely. Verse 13. I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven, there came one like a who? Son of Man. And he came to the Ancient of Days and was presented before him. Now what happens to this Son of Man? Looking at verse 14. And to him was given what? Dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is a what? Everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away. And his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. And so here we clearly see the Son of Man reigning with God. Now, when we look back at verse 13 in this chapter, we notice that this Son of Man was more than a Son of Man. Because it says here, behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man. And so if the Son of Man in one sense communicates humanity, this here is communicating more than humanity. Human, yes, but more than. Because he's like, but he's not the same. And clearly, to be he who has co-regency with God, who has an everlasting dominion, a kingdom that shall not be destroyed, it is entirely reasonable for us to say that this person being spoken of here is one with God, with the Ancient of Days. And so as Jesus uses that term, he is denoting himself not just to be a prophet of the order of Elijah, but to be more than that. He is the Son of Man. He is the King of Kings with the everlasting kingdom. As you look in Matthew and you consider Jewish Jesus, we understand that Matthew's intent is for us to see these connections. That actually, Jesus, the Christ, is God's Messiah. The one who was prophesied and predicted, and who came and gave his all. You see, there may be a cost for the call, but Jesus paid for the connection. We could not be connected to God apart from the sacrifice of Christ. A.W. Tozer is a much-loved author, had a huge impact on me, shaping me as I was in my maturing phases of the faith. And he says this: Christ has paid the full price for our redemption, but our walk with God on a daily basis will cost us much. Are we willing cheerfully to pay the cost? Are we willing cheerfully to pay the cost? You see, to follow Christ and live a life of true discipleship demands continuous personal sacrifice and dedication. And so I want to encourage you. God has, through Christ, provided for your connection, that you might have opportunity, that you might have ability to even answer the call. And even in paying the cost of the call is only by his grace that he gives. And I heard some new songs today that were new to me. Woo! Heart-stirring. And one of them, it went through, which was it, the Paul Belush one? And so it said something like, to follow him, it was by grace. And to love him is by grace. And it just kept saying, by grace, by grace, by grace, by grace. Praise be to God for his grace towards us. God has provided all that we need to respond. He has provided all that we need. He's given us his favor. He has given us forgiveness. He has given us his spirit. He has given us his word. And so may we be those who would reevaluate just what are our expectations of God. Are we just expecting all of the promises of the kingdom to be fulfilled right now? Comfort, security, pleasure, no pain, no tears? No. As you continue through Matthew, you'll appreciate that the kingdom is now and not yet. Now and not yet. We get a foretaste. We get the appetizers. But in due time, we'll have the full course. And so don't be discouraged when it feels like this is too much. I might as well just go and live like everyone else and do my own thing because this is too much. Well, that might be the cost of the call that you're wrestling with right there. And that's okay. Surrender all desires and aspirations, all expectations to Him, and know that God is faithful